Right. Welcome in. Welcome in. I am really glad that you're here for this conversation because what we're going to talk about today is something that has been sitting inside your practice the entire time and likely hasn't been fully activated yet. And as people are coming in, I'd love for you drop where you're coming in from tonight, put that in the chat. What role are you in your practice? I'd love to just see who we're having join the call tonight. And I'm Megan Greco, and I've worked inside every role in the practice other than the dentist. And now I work with practices across the country implementing prevention-based systems that actually improve patient outcomes and drive growth. And what I see over and over are structural issues that are holding practices back. Before we dive in, I want to thank Willow for sponsoring tonight's masterclass. I am very intentional about who I partner with, and what I appreciate is their focus on improving home care for patients in a way that actually supports what we're trying to do clinically. Here's what you're going to walk away with tonight. In our time together, we're going to identify gaps in traditional hygiene models, understand oral systemic connections, implement risk-based prevention strategies, elevate hygiene role in diagnosis and case acceptance, and build leadership systems within hygiene. Now, during the 20 years I've been in dentistry, I've always been focused on what I believed was exceptional patient care. I've transformed hygiene departments that consistently contribute up to 50% of total practice production. I've worked inside and run operations for practices that were growing, producing, and doing all the right things. But early in my career, I started noticing a pattern. The same patients coming back with the same issues time and again. Inflammation, recurrent decay, perio that never fully stabilized. And now my doctors and I were doing everything we were trained to do. We were diagnosing, we were treating, we were restoring, but our patients weren't actually getting healthier. And I started asking, how are we doing all of this work and not actually changing outcomes for our patients? And that question changed everything for me. Because the truth is, we're treating disease, but we're not curing it. And dentistry has become very good at doing procedures. But when you zoom out, we are not consistently creating health. And this is exactly where hygiene has been mispositioned. Because we must evolve from a reactive procedure-centered model to a prevention-centered health model. And this is where hygiene is uniquely positioned to lead. Hygiene was never meant to be a loss leader, a department that is maintained or managed. Hygiene was designed to be the diagnostic and prevention engine of the practice. And somewhere along the way, it got reduced to a schedule of procedures. And when we run our hygiene department that way, production is measured by volume, not value to the patient or practice. And periodontal therapy is delayed, rushed, or never even treatment planned. The doctor carries the pressure of diagnosis, treatment planning, and case acceptance. And unfortunately, continued practice growth requires more and more patients. However, when hygiene operates as leadership alongside the doctor, care is planned in a way that actually provides better outcomes for patients. Perio is diagnosed and treated early. Revenue scales because hygienists are screening properly, discussing conditions, building trust with patients. Hygienists provide a co-diagnosis, and the department starts to sustain itself. I started at my current practice about 5 years ago. I was hired as a hygiene lead, and we were planning to grow. Our doc wanted clear perio protocols. She was no longer okay with monitoring disease because our hygiene department had been operating inside a maintenance model for a really long time. And we were back to back slammed with patients, very insurance aware. We were efficient, And we were getting patients in and out, but definitely not profitable. I remember celebrating a $40,000 production month with our team. We thought we were killing it, but we weren't structured around prevention leadership. We were measuring production by volume. Perio conversations, they were happening, but they weren't always converting. And if they did, I actually had nowhere to actually schedule the periodontal therapy. That's how busy we were. And I felt a sense of responsibility to my patients. So I started shortening my lunches, coming in early just to get them in. And hygiene wages were rising. We drastically needed another hygienist to cover the patient load. But my doc was rightly worried how we would cover the salary of another hygienist at the market rate. So we took a deep dive into what was happening in our practice, what we were prioritizing, started having transparent conversations about money with our team, asking different questions about our patients' disease processes. And I found myself wondering, is hygiene actually carrying its weight, in the business then? It was definitely busy, seeing patients and working hard. But at some point, we can't really work any harder. Motivation was definitely not the issue. I didn't need to try harder. I needed to redesign the structure of our hygiene department. So we started to define hygiene's leadership role clearly. We built prevention conversation frameworks. We tracked the right KPIs. We aligned scheduling with risk instead of habit. We made responsibility match authority. Now, I'm no longer practicing clinically. I've moved into the operations side of things. But today, still with one hygienist, hygiene production consistently accounts for 50% of total practice production in our practice. And our hygienist is not burnt out. This didn't happen because we added more pressure. It happened because we aligned leadership, prevention, and profitability and created a framework that allows our hygienists to provide excellent care and have the conversations needed to move the needle for our patients' health lives. When hygiene operates as prevention leadership instead of something to be maintained, the math changes and the emotional weight changes too. So where is the state of your hygiene department today? I want to see where you guys are right now. So go ahead and drop in the chat. Is your hygiene department booked but not driving growth? Patients returning with the same conditions over and over again? Is your hygiene department strong clinically but with inconsistent systems? Or are you fully aligned and thriving? Go ahead and drop in the chat. Let's see where everybody is. Stacy's saying most practices she's seen are booked but not driving growth. Same for Aubrey. Christina seeing strong clinically but inconsistent system. Yeah, Stacy, exactly. Patients returning with the same conditions. That's what I was seeing a lot of too. And now I know, dentists, you are feeling the squeeze. You're paying market or above market hygiene wages. You want to honor prevention and comprehensive patient care. And oftentimes you're staying in network for patient access and loyalty. Yet hygiene is financially tight. It's emotionally heavy. And you feel the need to constantly step in and manage it. Hygiene doesn't randomly become a loss leader. And truthfully, hygiene isn't the problem. The problem is the model hygiene is being asked to operate inside. We've all been trained to work inside a reactive model. Disease shows up, we treat it and monitor it. We often provide our patients with one-size-fits-all recommendations. When we see inflammation or bleeding, we reach for floss and mouthwash samples and tell our patients to do better. When we see decay, we coach our patients on diet and flossing, maybe recommend prescription fluoride. We pack our schedules, sometimes double booking our hygiene teams just to keep the margins even. And we deal with insurance all day. But the truth is, insurance was never designed to fund modern preventive dentistry. It was meant to manage costs for patients. We aren't provided the opportunity to dig deeper, ask better questions, and look for the root cause of disease. In this model, production numbers don't reflect long-term value. And hygiene is often measured by output and not impact, when really it should be the opposite. Hygiene wages are the highest they've ever been. Insurance reimbursements are pretty much at the lowest they've ever been. Patients expect more education, more time, more whole body insight. And dentists and hygienists feel caught in the middle, right? We're absorbing costs while trying to preserve culture and care. And this tension is what is keeping practices stuck. Let's talk about what this actually means. Hygiene wages have increased significantly over the last several years. And rightfully so. Hygiene was undervalued for a really long time. Insurance reimbursement has remained largely stagnant, and patient expectations have expanded. They want more education, more time, more systemic connection. They're connecting the dots on their own and coming in and asking questions. Let's be real. The traditional hygiene model was built for a different economic era. In that era, volume covered inefficiency. But today, volume just exposes that same inefficiency. If hygiene operates strictly on prophy codes and what's covered by insurance, the math is capped. So the real question becomes, how does hygiene evolve without abandoning insurance? We have to change the model. We remind ourselves and our team that we are not just treating teeth and gums in isolation, and that what we are seeing is ongoing disease progression. And if we don't change the model, that progression continues. And this is often where we start to blame our patients. They're not flossing, it's their diet, they're not compliant. But the reality is, nearly half of adults have periodontal disease. And caries remains one of the most prevalent chronic diseases globally. So we have to start asking better questions. Is this really non-compliance, or is it the system? Are patients actually the problem? Or are we expecting consistency and precision from systems that don't support it? We're asking patients to execute something very specific, multiple times a day, with technique consistency and long-term behavior change. And then when it doesn't happen consistently, we call it non-compliance. But most patients were never set up to succeed in that model. We've talked about one-size-fits-all dentistry not working clinically. The same is true for what we send patients home with. Better systems create better outcomes. This is one of the reasons why I chose to partner with Willow for this training, because they are challenging that model, especially when it comes to kids and early habit formation. Their brushes remove a lot of the variability that leads to poor outcomes. Things like inconsistent technique. We know kids just don't have the dexterity to brush perfectly, right? Lack of supervision. Parents are tapped out at nighttime. They often are not available to help with home care, especially before bed. And, we also have to consider, habits never fully form if we don't provide the right tools. And this is the bigger point. If we want different clinical outcomes, we have to support what's happening every single day outside of the practice. Hygiene doesn't stop in your chair. It either continues at home or the disease continues. And that's why this conversation matters so much. Perio remains highly prevalent, and caries remains one of the most common diseases, despite everything we're doing. And we must make a change. And hygiene is where we make the shift first. Your hygiene department is the first line of diagnosis, education, and behavior change. It's where we move from procedure to prevention, from task to diagnosis, and from support team to leadership. The practices that are growing right now, they understand the potential and are leading the shift. Take a moment to consider, where is your practice, your hygiene department, on this spectrum from reactive to preventive? And no judgment, just awareness. Where are we? Where are your systems? Are we completely in a reactive model, or have we started to talk about and implement preventive-based systems? And how can we move our practices even one step closer to preventive and comprehensive care? So let me show you what this actually looks like when we build it out correctly. I have the hygiene transformation framework, where we look at the clinical pillars. Our clinical pillar, we create a hygiene protocol and calibrate each team member. Our hygiene department becomes diagnosis driven. We do more than just karyochart and track bleeding. We assess caries risk and ask questions to find the root cause of disease. By doing that, we can intervene early in the disease process and provide personalized care. Next, we have our communication pillar. Your team starts to have trust-driven conversations. You've probably all heard about sitting knee to knee, eye to eye with your patient, but this goes even deeper. We have an obligation not just to describe our findings and tell them our recommendations. Patients need to fully understand their condition, and we must tie it back to what is important to them. We also have to provide oral systemic education. We're connecting the dots for our patients. Long gone are the days of oral disease sitting in isolation. The mountain of evidence that our oral health impacts our overall health and longevity is incredible. And this is why we must refuse to not have the conversation with our patients, so that they walk away truly understanding the stakes of not treating their disease. Belief over scripts. Just like there is no one-size-fits-all care, there is no one-size-fits-all script for case acceptance. We get to know our patient, and we believe that the treatment we are recommending, the questions we're asking, meant to improve their health. Not just reduce bleeding or fix a cavity. Your team fully believes in the comprehensive care your practice provides and clearly communicates the benefits of prevention and interceptive care. And this is how hygiene steps up into leadership. Doctors, when we've empowered our hygienists with systems, protocols, and communication skills, they naturally step into leadership. They begin screening differently, documenting and discussing findings with the patient before you even walk into the op. How many times have you stepped into your hygiene operatory and your hygienist has her back to you, typing her note, and leaves you to introduce yourself to the patient, ask what's going on, and then do your exam with zero handoff? That is certainly not effective. We have to align the doctor and hygiene team. The systems and protocols allow for alignment across the clinical team. Hygienists elevate the standard of care so the rest of the team follows. And they take this off your shoulder when they step into leadership. And most importantly, they own the clinical treatment plan and case acceptance outcomes. You now have a partner in care that upholds standards, takes a deeper look when patients show up with disease, and cares if patients don't move forward. You have a team member who is stepping into accountability with you for the outcomes of their patients. So let's make this real. Before the shift, hygiene looks like what most practices are experiencing right now. Trophies are stacked. Perio is undiagnosed or inconsistently treated. Patients are coming back with the same conditions. And your team is working hard. But no one is seeing real change because we're stuck in the hamster wheel. And after the shift, everything starts to move differently. Diagnosis becomes clear and consistent. Patients understand what's happening and why it matters. Case acceptance increases, not because our team is pushing harder, but because it's rooted in trust. And hygiene begins to contribute at a completely different level, clinically and financially. Hygiene is not a loss leader. It was never meant to be. It was meant to drive diagnosis. It was meant to lead prevention. And it was meant to support the long-term health of your patients and your clients. And the truth is, hygienists are uniquely positioned to be leaders in your practice. Part of our core training is not just to scale, but it's to motivate patients. It's to move them towards health. Dental hygiene is one of the only health professions that is seated in prevention. And somewhere along the way, we've forgotten that. And that's why I created the Hygiene Department Growth Blind Spot. This ebook is here for you because most practices are trying to grow hygiene without actually seeing what's holding them back. It's not a checklist, it's a perspective shift. So inside this resource, there are 3 reasons hygiene drives profitability and trust. The most common structural blind spot and one immediate communication upgrade you can implement. This will help you see where your hygiene team is misaligned and provide clarity before you try to fix it. And once you see it, you have a decision to make. So go ahead and scan this, download it, and you can start using the insights right away. Now here's where most practices get stuck. Because information does not equal implementation. You can understand everything we just talked about and still not see a single change inside your practice. You can talk to your team until you are blue in the face about finding out what is causing your patient's disease, about changing the conversations with our patients, about digging deeper. But if they don't have clarity around how to do that or why it's important, they won't implement it. Because information alone does not create transformation. And this is what I see over and over again. There's no clear structure for how hygiene should operate. There's no alignment between doctor and hygiene on diagnosis and protocol. There's no accountability to actually implement or sustain change. This is absolutely not a motivation problem. Not a team problem either. It's a leadership and systems problem. This is at the core level of how your team functions. And if the shift from reactive to preventive and elevating hygiene to leadership is something you're looking at and thinking, I know this is important, but I'm not sure how to implement it, I want you to know you don't have to do this alone. This is the work I do. I help practices take everything we're talking about and actually build it into systems, conversations, and workflows that work in real life. So this is your starting point. Because once you start to see it, the next question becomes, how do we actually build a practice around it? Now, you should already have a snapshot of your practice. The hygiene assessment you completed before our call, and here's the QR code if you haven't been able to get to it yet, And that assessment is not just a form. That's a reflection of where your systems are strong and where they're breaking down. And each of you that complete this assessment will receive a follow-up email with personalized strategy so you can see where are the gaps, where are the inconsistencies, where are patients falling through the cracks, and then begin to build the systems that move your practice forward. Let's dream a little. Like, what would it actually look like to build this the right way inside your practice? Not just understand it, not just talk about it, but fully implement it. What could you let go of if hygiene is filling the production and revenue gap inside your practice? And this is exactly why I created the Hygiene Leadership Advisory. This is where we take everything you've seen today and build it into your practice step by step. This is not more information. This is implementation. And every month, you're getting clear clinical frameworks that your team can execute, walking through real conversations and patient situations. You're getting a one-on-one strategy call for the doctor and direct lines of communication for the doctor and hygiene teams between our calls. You're building leadership inside your hygiene department. And you're putting systems in place that actually stick. These are things your practice can actually implement. And this is what starts to happen when this is built correctly. Diagnosis becomes consistent. Patients trust what they're hearing, and your team is aligned. And growth becomes a byproduct of doing things the right way. By refusing to not have the conversation, right? Helping our patients to understand their disease. By having an accountable team that cares about the outcomes of your patients. By having your team join you on the journey to building a preventive and productive practice. No longer should all of that weight rest on the doctor's shoulders. Your hygienists have the ability to step up into leadership and be the partners in care that you deserve to have. This is definitely not for practices just looking for more CE. This is for practices that are ready to change how they operate. For the ones who are done repeating the same patterns. For the ones who want better outcomes for their patients and a stronger, more aligned practice. So this is the direction you know your practice needs to go. I want to invite you to take the next step. Apply for the advisory. We'll take your assessment, look at your current systems, and map out exactly what this would look like inside your practice. The link is in the chat. Hygiene is already inside your practice. It's already there. It just hasn't been fully built yet. And when you build it the right way, it changes your patient outcomes. It changes your team. When your hygienists step up to leadership, the rest of the team follows. It will change your entire practice. So let's do this right. Now, I want to open this up for a few strategic questions. If something shifted for you today, this is the time to explore that. I'm happy to go deeper. Go ahead and type your questions in the chat or feel free to come off mute. In the meantime, I do want to let everybody know there is CE being provided for this webinar this evening. Christina, if you could drop the QR code into the chat or the link in the chat so that everyone can do the post-webinar evaluation so that we can get their CE sent out to them, that would be great.
Megan, I have a question.
And so doctors, I want you to understand that support starts when we start allowing our team to support us. When we build a team that is empowered and educated and understands how to have communication with patients and team members, you're going to have more effective growth. Hygiene is not just going to be there to clean your patient's teeth anymore. Hygiene is actually going to be able to step up and provide revenue for your practice. No longer is it okay for hygienists to come in, clean teeth, go about their business, go about their day, and leave without understanding the implications of our high rates of pay, which by all means, again, hygienists deserve to be paid at, but we also have to help our hygienists understand the return on that pay. How can hygienists step up and help the practice to grow? I'd love to hear what's going on in your practices. What have you seen? What can I help you with? Yeah, Stacy, I see you raised your hand.
Can you hear me?
I can. Yeah.
Okay, good. I just want to, my question for you, as I'm subbing in some of these offices, I am seeing some, I guess I'll call them barriers, right? I don't necessarily know if it's the hygiene team. Sometimes I wonder if it's the dentist, right? Or dentist. So I'm just curious, like from your experience, like what are you seeing as maybe barriers for elevating some of these hygiene practices?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest barriers is clarity. You know, we talk amongst our team members and amongst ourselves, especially as hygienists, right? We're always talking about how can we connect our patients' oral health to their overall health? How can we help our patients become more successful and become healthier? But we don't always have clarity around how to do that. And so the biggest barrier that I actually see in practices is that there's zero protocol.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if no one has taken the time to actually script out what a protocol looks like,
Yeah.
you know, and not just like we have 4 or 5 millimeter pocketing and attachment loss, so now we're recommending SRP, like even beyond that.
Yeah.
You know, if we're seeing bleeding or we're seeing pocketing, then we need to be checking on the microbiome, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's happening? We have to dig deeper. And so when we're able to build out a protocol with our hygiene team, we're actually able to step into things that, you know, are beyond the normal preventative codes that we're billing out. And when we step into those more prevention and interceptive based procedures, it's natural that hygiene production is going to increase.
Yeah. So is that more or less like the coaching that you're doing is with the hygiene team to get them to kind of rethink their protocols and stuff like that?
Yep. So specifically the advisory is for hygiene teams and helping them step up into leadership, helping them to build on their clinical protocols, helping with communication. But I also do consult and coach for full practices as well.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Wow, it has been lovely being on here tonight. Thank you so, so much for joining. And I hope that the insights that I shared are going to help everyone build a more profitable and health-based, prevention-based hygiene department. Please, if you are looking for CE, use that link in the chat to fill out your post-webinar evaluation, and you should be receiving your CE certificates within the next week or two. They will come from CE approved, so keep an eye out in your email for that. But again, thank you so much for joining. It was lovely to have everyone. Thank you.